Torvald story time. These stories come from my life in the current Middle Ages as a member of the Society For Creative Anachronism. Been a member for 36 years. And as a storyteller, poet, singer, songwriter, I've always felt that part of my job is to record history and events that take place in my life, things that I'm either involved with or witness. And these stories are the types of stories that we would tell each other sitting around the campfire at night, and we refer to them as "no shit, there I was" stories. Because they often started with "no shit, there I was." So this particular story is actually brought to mind because of the previous story that I just told. And it has to do with something that I talked about tournament fighting, on how when I fight in a tournament, especially a crown or coronet tournament, where you're trying to become prince or king, that I would prefer to fight somebody that is either better than I am or less experienced than I am. Because either way, the fight is usually short. As I mentioned in the previous stories, it was not unusual for the coronet tournaments to have 30 to 50 fighters in it, and for the crown tournaments to have 70 to over 100 fighters in it. And so the tournaments end up being as much an endurance competition as they are about skill and experience. And so you really don't want to fight someone who is of an equal level of skill and knowledge and experience, because what's going to end up happening is you're going to have a knockdown, drag-out cat fight. And no matter who wins, when you go on to the next round, to the next opponent, you are going to be totally wasted and gassed, and you're not going to be able to put up much of a fight. And so this story illustrates that exact scenario. Now this story, the person involved other than myself, is a lady known in the society as Brynn McClelland. She is a knight. She was also a princess in her own right. And she is currently involved in live steel combat, and I believe she won a championship with live steel polearm just a couple years ago. But at this time, she was still an unbelted fighter, meaning she had not yet been knighted, and she'd been around for several years like I was. And we were fighting in a crown tournament up near Sacramento at a reservoir. It was bloody damn hot. I mean hot. Now, the one thing that's good about hot in California is that it's not usually humid when it's hot in California. California's humidity index usually stays fairly low. But at this particular reservoir we were at, there was virtually no shade, and it was roasting bloody hot. There was no grass. We were fighting on dirt, so it was dusty as well as hot. Did I mention that it was hot? Because it was hot. It really was. So at any rate, there were a lot of fighters in Crown Tournament. There were 80 to 90 fighters this time at this particular tournament. And so they divided the tournament field into quarters, and they separated us into groups, and you would fight in just your group until enough fighters had been eliminated that they could condense the field into less fields. And usually that starts happening around the 4th or 5th round. By then, enough people have been eliminated that they can start condensing the lists. So in this case, Brynn and I were in a group that was in field number 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. The crown, the thrones, are on that end. So 1 and 2 are right in front of the thrones, 3 and 4 are in the back. And we were on field 3. And we were actually the first fight called for that field in the 3rd round. Now at that point, both of us were down 1 life. Usually our tournaments were fought double elimination. You have to lose twice before you're out. Both of us had won our 1st round fight, but we had lost our 2nd round fight, and now we were the first fight called in the 3rd round on our field. So we go out there to fight each other. They call the lay on, and we just have at it. We're blasting away at each other. Nobody can get anything through. We're moving around each other, maneuvering, stepping, speeding up, slowing down, throwing everything we can, and both of our defenses were just so tight, Neither one of us could put a stick on the other. Finally, somehow, I got a shot through on her leg. So she has to go down to her knees. If you're not familiar with SCA fighting, typically, if you're hitting the leg and it's a sound counting blow, you can no longer use that leg. And normally we signify that by going down to our knees. So I back up, I make sure the sun isn't in her eyes, circle around to make sure that she's set, ask her if she's ready, and then I step back in. Now understand, you don't necessarily have to do that. In our style of combat, if you're both going at it hot and heavy as one person gets leg and they simply drop straight down, you can stay there and continue fighting. If, on the other hand, as someone is legged, you have something of a lull, it's considered courteous and chivalrous to make sure, because of the angle difference, that the sun isn't beaming directly into their eyes. Now, mind you, this is a convention, it's a courtesy, it's not required. And one of the things we always teach our younger fighters is if you're going to do that, if you're going to check and make sure the sun is not in their eyes, back completely out of weapons range, because there is nothing that says they can't throw a shot if you're not paying attention. Even if you were trying to be courteous and chivalrous, there's nothing discourteous or unchivalrous about them continuing to fight. It's all about defending yourself. So when I legged her and she went down, there was that break in the combat for that moment, and I backed out of range, like I said, make sure the sun wasn't in her eyes, asked her if she was set, stepped back in. We're going at it, we're going at it, we're going at it. She finally gets my leg. Great, now we're both down. Now mind you, you've heard me say, we were going at it, we were going at it, we were going at it. This is all time-consuming. All of that time we spent before I managed to leg her, then all that time fighting before she legged me. It's roasting hot. Did I ever mention in this story that it was hot? Because it was roasting hot. So, we're both exhausted, and we're just blasting at each other, praying that one of us gets something through. Neither one of us is going to give up anything. We're not going to quit. You've got to get us. At this point, I am completely gassed, so is she. The type of shield that I use in this kind of combat is a teardrop kite. So it's round at the top and comes down to a point. When I'm down on my knees, and especially if I settle back and sit on my heels, I can actually just rest the point of my shield on the ground. And that's what I had gotten to. I was so tired that I really didn't want to carry the weight of my shield any more than I had to. And so I had it sitting on the ground, and if she throwed a headshot at me, I would just duck my head rather than raise my shield to block it. And she was pretty much in the same condition. Unfortunately, the type of shield she was using didn't give her that option. She couldn't just rest it. But her shield was what we call a bunny round. There's a funny story behind the creation of that. The bunny round was first used by Duke Radnor of Gildemar, a knight in the Society, and he didn't create it on purpose. What a bunny round is if you take a standard, what is called a heater shield, because the triangular shape that is slightly curved to come down to the point resembles the bottom of an iron. And in England, those irons were referred to as heaters. And so that was where the name apparently came from. I don't know if that's true or not. That was what I was told. But at any rate, Radnor was getting ready for a tournament, and his shield had taken so much damage to that bottom point that it wasn't safe to use as it was, and he didn't have time to make a new shield, so he just cut it off, round. So what you ended up with was something that was a round shield that had ears on it, which is why it got called a bunny round. Okay, so at any rate, Brynn is using a bunny round, which is a lighter shield than mine, more maneuverable than mine, so it wasn't weighing her down quite as much as mine had done to me. So again, we're still going at it, we're blasting each other, we're fighting. Now, to give you an idea just how long this fight dragged out, okay, when we eventually finished our fight, I want you to understand this. I haven't got to that part of the story yet. But we found out that our fight had gone on so long, all the other fields had finished the round, and they had moved fighters from our field to the next field over so that our field's rounds could be completed. That is how long this fight dragged on. With a field of 20 to 30 fighters in each quarter, our fight lasted long enough that everybody else was completely finished before we were. That is how long this fight dragged out. Finally, she threw a shot for my head. I tried to duck behind my shield. I didn't quite make it. Skipped off the edge of my rounded curve, ricocheted off the side of my helm, and I just fell over. And she said, "Are you sure?" And I went, "Yes." And the marshal said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yes. Stick a fork in me. I am done. It got through enough. I felt it. My head moved. That's it. I'm over. Thank you so much for a fight I will never in my life ever forget. It was grand. It was glorious. And I loved every moment of it. But dear God, thank you. It was over." So I get up slowly. I drag myself over to my chair, which fortunately isn't very far from the field I was fighting on. Get my helmet off, collapse into my chair, and while at the same time I'm disappointed that I didn't advance in the tournament, I am glad as hell that I am done, because now I can get out of my armor because it's hot! And I'm going to go down and run and jump in the reservoir to cool down. Brynn, on the other hand, poor Brynn, she's got a chair about maybe 10 feet from me, so she's not far from our field either. She had come off at the same time I did. Now because our fight had gone so long, remember, everybody else was done. They were all waiting on us before they could start the next round. So fourth round is now starting. They're getting everybody going in their fields. Brynn had gotten her helmet only this far off when they told her to arm and report to the field. Helmet comes back down, chin strapped tight, and walks right out to fight. I may be misremembering who it was. I do know that it was a duke. A duke is someone who's been king at least twice in our organization. They've won this tournament at least twice. I believe the duke she fought was Duke Rolf the Relentless. I could be misremembering. All I remember for certain was that it was a duke. She walked out, they yelled "lay on," bam, it was over, she was done. She didn't have anything left to try and even throw a shot. They called "lay on," she started to move, and bam, it was over. Ah, the good old days.